it to YouTube, then yes.
All right. Michael Ginsburg, we are here on a live discussion. We'll see how many people join. Hopefully, we can get some people chatting and whatever. But since we're just starting, I want you to be able to introduce yourself. I can see that we're live on YouTube here. The link is working, so that's good. Tell me about yourself and what actionable truth is, and then from there we can talk about the what I noticed. You really stood out for me when you started to say that it's time to kill Substack and that there's basically like a point of no return here. That digital ID and this push for government censorship and the ID validation stuff has gone too far.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Terry. So just a little bit of my background. I don't want to get into too much detail because I've discussed it many times before, but my background is actually in technology, right? Technology. I worked in different aspects of technology, including tech consulting and auditing, compliance, did a fair bit of digital marketing as well. So I'm familiar with a lot of aspects of technology.
Right.
Always kind of had like I guess a conspiratorial, I wouldn't say conspiratorial mind, but maybe conspiratorial leaning, like, post 9/11 and all that sort of stuff. But it was kind of always on the back burner. And obviously, when things happen the way they happen, like, at the start of this decade, that's when I really realized that something serious is going on. And for me personally, like, the absolute, like, crossing the Rubicon moment was actually the Canadian Freedom Convoy. That's when I realized, okay, if something like that is happening in Canada, poster child of liberal democracy, and then very similar things started happening in Australia where I live, whereas, okay, like, this is unprecedented. Like, we're seeing something genuinely serious.
So you mean like freezing the bank accounts of the people who are even just donating to the trucker convoy? That was crazy. I live in Canada and I was watching that at the time, and I was not surprised that they were trying to crack down on the truckers themselves and the people organizing that. But it was an entirely different thing with Chrystia Freeland when she started going after and freezing the bank accounts of people who just donated to that. Sorry, man.
No, you're right.
You? Okay.
Yeah. I think you were frozen.
Wait, what's frozen?
We're good now. We're good. Yep.
Okay. Sorry. Well, so anyway, your take on the trucker convoy and the that's what was sort of this turning point where you realized it could be happening even in Canada, right?
For me, there was actually one thing that happened even before that. So there was the introduction of, like, emergency, like, rule, or, like, almost like, like a state of emergency, like, I think for the first time, like, in Canada's history, because there's, like, some truckers who, like, were driving across the country and wanted to reach the capital and, like, sit there for a while and honk their horns. I mean, they just looked insane to me, right? I mean, that was insane. And then the extremely violent way that, like, forget about, like, the government doesn't want to listen. Okay. You petition, you do the demonstration. Government's okay. Well, cool. We're still going to do what we want. But I mean, extremely violent way that, like, the people were treated, right? And represented as neo-Nazis and this and that. And, like, they were like brown people there. They're neo-Nazis as well. I mean, it's just, like, insane. It's insane. And I was watching for myself. Okay, what the hell? Like, what the hell? So for me, that was kind of like the turning point, right? So that kind of like the point where I kind of, like, stepped away from, like, legacy media or mainstream media, people still call them, and I started consuming a lot of independent media, or what I thought was independent at the time, and pretty quickly, like, I consumed a lot of that, and pretty quickly, what happened is I started getting quite depressed. Because, I mean, the information that was provided was truthful, or mainly truthful, or predominantly truthful, but there was no solutions. It was kind of like, okay, well, we're all gonna die, we're going to be enslaved by 2030. See you tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow for part two.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. So, and it's something that was really, like, lacking for me, at least personally, and it really affected my state of mind. I thought, okay, well, if I that I'm sure there's other people like me, right? who actually like, want to understand, okay, what do we do with that, right?
Hmm.
Other than petitioning, other than, praying or whatever, okay, is there anything else that we can do? And yeah, well, that's kind of like, where the name of my platform came. That's how I came up with that idea, Actionable Truth, because I'm actually going to try and like everything that is happening, I'm looking at it. Some people have different perspectives. Like people look at it from biblical perspective. People look at it from historical perspective. People look at whatever spiritual perspective. I look at it from actions. Okay, well, this is what's happening. What can we actually do? And that's
What I
kind of
found
how.
interesting about your Substack, because even
Mhm.
before the digital ID was announced as something to age verification in Australia, where you are, um, I noticed that you were focusing on more the actual engineering, tech solutions, things like that, which I love talking to engineers and people who actually sort of understand how one system interacts with another system, because
Mhm.
it is easy to just say, well, everything's doomed, things keep getting worse, and you just think of it as sort of a generic slide into tyranny. But these things happen through specific measures, through specific laws and policies. And so every time I talk to somebody who's actually an engineer or a software engineer or something, it helps to demystify what's going on. And then it does suggest that there's some actual actions you can take. I mean, I personally use Linux. I've switched off from Windows completely. I still have Android and Google all over the place for stuff, but I am very interested in things like, a de-Googled phone and the idea of never using Google products. All of the most important stuff I do is not on Google, but I still keep it around. But it seems like everyone has sort of a line in the sand where um, that's the point where they completely cut off a business. They basically boycott it. And, you know, I did that with Microsoft with the Copilot and recall and stuff, trying to screenshot your computer and basically keylog everything you're doing. It's insane. And they're so sloppy about it. But when I heard about Substack doing the ID verification laws, I thought this is the government mandating all social media companies, not just Substack, not just um, certain platforms, from what I understand. You could correct me on that. And then it's like, how could they not go along with this? They would have to pay billions of dollars in fees, from what I understand, if they didn't use the age verification laws. So although although I've seen some of your reporting on that, and I want to hear more from you, can you just start with saying, like, what choices would Substack have if they didn't want to go along with this legislation?
True. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's a good point to start on. Okay. So let's people need to understand the facts of what has actually happened, right? Because the way that Substack presents that, right? They introduced the persona age verification in the UK, okay, because of what's called the UK Online Safety Act,
Mm,
right? And in Australia, because of what's called the Australian Online Safety Act, which also basically there was an amendment introduced to that required to ban under 16-year-olds from social media, right? So they present that, look, we had to comply with that because obviously there's these laws in the UK and in Australia. And that's why we introduced persona in the UK and Australia. Now, before we get into the details of that, it's also important to know that obviously, what's happening in the UK and Australia will be rolled out globally, right? So if people in the US watching that, or in Canada, or in South America, or anywhere really, Southeast Asia, well, that's tough for them, right?
mhm.
Or people think, we'll just use a VPN and bypass it. Eventually, it will be everywhere, right?
Right.
Because this is a better rollout, right? To use a tech term, right? And the better rollout clearly, I mean, unless there's like a massive backlash, it will be deemed as successful. Okay, so now let's have a look at what has actually happened, right? So, okay, let's see if I can share a screen here, because it'll be actually interesting to show the what Substack have actually said themselves, right? So this is in the UK context, okay? So that's the UK Online Safety Act. right? So again, there's a difference between what's happening in the UK and in Australia. Why? Because in the UK, the legislation requires to restrict access to content that is deemed adult only. Whereas in Australia, the legislation requires restricting under 16-year-olds from accessing designated social media platforms, right? There's a difference here, right? Let's start with the UK, right? So the UK, in order to comply, supposedly, right, with the UK Online Safety Act, right? So they need to restrict, like they need to, Substack needs to verify that people are 18 plus if they want to access any of these categories, right? Sexually explicit pornographic, I think nobody can argue with that. Content that encourages promotions, that's, again, this is not something that many people will have an issue with. And I think even platforms like Odyssey are supposed to be like, you know, pretty extreme on the free speech scale, like, you know, they restrict that. Bullying or harassment, that's where we start to, okay, well, what is the definition of that? And then
Right.
we have
Yeah.
the big one, you know, then we have a big one called hate content, right? Okay. This one, the last one is pretty simple. I think it's pretty clear. But this one, what is hate content, right? So there's problems with that. Okay. Now, beyond that, right? When we look at what has actually happened, right, and who was restricted on Substack, right, who, like, you know, the readers of which publications were required to, like, you know, do the age verification with persona, you cannot say that that content fits into any of these categories. What it does fit into is dissident content. So people who are anti-vaccine, you can say anti-government, anti-whatever, right? Maybe anti the trans agenda, or, like, you know, people who, like, you know, don't like the fact that, like, you know, certain, like, you know, religions are being targeted or want to target specific religions. I don't know. But I mean, maybe that would be, like, you know, that would be reasonable here. But I mean, all the other stuff, right? I mean, if you look at, like, I'll give you two examples from the UK, like actual UK people, actually three examples, right? So you have Doc Malik, you have David Hughes, right? And you have Ian Davis, all prominent, like, you know, UK Substackers, right? Or David used to be on Substack as well. He's left now. He's got his own platform. So they're all, like, you know, people in the UK. I mean, if anyone is familiar with the work of these people, you tell me, where does it fit in this?
Yeah, I'm noticing it says underneath that, reporting illegal or harmful content. It says if you are in the UK and you believe content on Substack may be illegal or harmful to minors under the OSA, you can submit a report. So that, you know, it's just it's a very low standard of proof. You could just say you believe that something might be harmful to minors, and, you know, just disagreeing with the government or encouraging people to look at alternatives from the government narrative, I guess. I mean, I've seen that kind of stuff in Canada as well, that it's, you know, they don't even have a box to put you in. It's just considered harmful or dangerous. Just, it really is kind of Orwellian, just bad think, you know, it's just like, or wrong
I mean, you
think,
know,
you know.
this one is probably the most problematic. Hate content, right?
Yeah.
Hate content. What is hate content? Like, you know, anti-Semitism is hate content. And what is anti-Semitism, right? I mean, there's a whole big argument about what is anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
I mean, is anti-Semitism is, like, you know, criticizing the state of Israel or criticizing Zionism. Is that anti-Semitism? What happens when, like, you know, a Jewish person like myself does that, right? Am I an anti-Semite? I mean, you know what I mean? And in the US, that is the definition, right? I mean, criticizing the state of Israel is considered anti-Semitism. So if I was in America and I was saying bad things about Israel, as a Jewish person, what would I have? I'd have the FBI show up at my door. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? So that's the UK. Okay, let's have a look now at Australia. Okay, so here's Australia. Now, in Australia, so that's what Substack are saying. Let's have a look quickly. All right, so they're saying regulates digital services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Users in Australia will be required to verify their age to access Substack.com and Substack app. Now, here is where I call BS. Why? Because here is the official government list of designated platform as of now, right? So here is where is it? There we go. Right? So that's the e-safety commissioner of Australia. So that's like, E. Karen, Julie Inman Grant, the American born, right? And they stipulate here, right? Services that e-safety considers will be age-restricted social media platforms. Where is Substack? Where?
Oh, wow. It's not even on it.
Right? And interestingly enough, just to like show you how like, it comes like a, okay, so all of these are designated, but Pinterest is not designated. WhatsApp is not designated, right? Because those are instant messengers, like they're not designated, right? One thing that like in a Roblox, right? A platform that is very obviously popular with children. And what happened is like, there's like a lot of
Predators
nefarious
on it.
players there that like, contact kids to that platform because it's not designated. So what I'm trying to say here, so when Substack says that they are required to comply, that is bullshit. Right?
You're right.
Another thing, right? So here's another thing that is bullshit. Let's have a look. So Substack sent, right, this notice. Let me see if I can find it. So when I think the day before or maybe the day after, let's have a look. Okay. All right. So they sent this notice, right? Now here's what they're saying. Your email list, publishing process, and relationship with your subscribers are not affected, right? Here's another thing that they're saying. So that's what Substack sent to publishers. I actually, for some reason, never received that email, but a lot of publishers did, and it was posted online, so it is genuine. It says here, paid subscribers are already verified. Anyone with a credit card on file does not need to take extra steps. That is patently false. False. It's a lie. L-I-E. Because a lot of paying subscribers in Australia, definitely, and I know of at least 10 cases, right? And we have a podcaster, Robin from Courage in the Cure, who, like, she like described that happened to her, like public, she discussed it publicly, right? She was locked out. They were locked out of their account despite having paid subscriptions. So supposedly, like, Substack had their credit, and it's actually not even, it's patently false because anyone with credit card on file, right? Substack does not keep credit cards on file. Stripe does.
Oh, right.
Right? Substack does not collect payments. The only thing that Substack does is collect their 10% through the integration that they have. So there's multiple lies here, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I didn't realize that not only were they not required to be doing this, but that, that their terms would be contradictory. Like that is very suspicious. Then what is their goal then? If they're not even being pressured.
Exactly. Right? And that's kind of where, because it was evident. I mean, you don't have to like, you don't have to be like a rocket scientist and be like, super smart to figure out that what Substack said will happen did not happen. And nobody like in Australia, because in Australia it basically kicked in, and in the UK, it's interesting enough, it kicked in on the same day, the 10th of December, right? Which was the day that the Australian legislation kicked in, right? And formally, right? And it happened immediately, right? So you can't say that like, or some people reported like, Doc Malik or David Hughes or Ian Davis as having like, hate content, right? It doesn't make sense. So there was clearly a list, like, there was like
right
database with publications, right? That they were like listed there, and come the deadline or someone presses a button, boom, the age verification wall goes up. There's not like, there's no other explanation. Furthermore, obviously, right? Substack lied. Blatantly, openly. You don't have to see that, right? So that's simple, right? The last simple thing is, okay, why have they done that? As you asked, did they have another choice? What is the actual motive behind this operation? So first of all, let's talk about like, what, like, did they have to do that? Let's assume that the Australian government, designated them, and that list that I just showed you, right? I'll put it again, right? This one, right? Included Substack. So Substack was listed here, okay? So here's what we need to understand. First of all, okay, yeah, Australian government can say, okay, we'll fine you $50 million, okay. All right, and Substack can say, well, a couple of things. First of all, we're in an American company, registered in California. We have no office presence or any registration or anything like that in Australia. You want to fine us? Good luck, first of all. Or they can just decide, okay, well, we're just gonna, like what Beetroot did, where they blocked like users in the UK and left the UK, and that's a British platform. Like, I mean, it was started by a British person, right? So there's a lot of options that they can do. But here's the other big thing that I think people are not aware enough, okay? And people look at Substack and they see Chris Best and Amish McKenzie, right? Chris Best, the CEO, Amish McKenzie, the chief writing officer. It's interesting. It's becoming like a video platform, but it's called the chief writing officer. But anyway, and they think, okay, well, they're in charge. They run the show. They don't run the show. Who's actually running the show, right, is a guy by the name of Mark Andreessen. Are you familiar with that name?
I've definitely heard it a lot of times, but I don't know how connected it is. I don't know what it's all connected with.
All right. I think I actually have some. It'll be interesting. Instead of me talking about it, let's have a listen to what he has to say. So we have this one, and then we have this one. All right. So let's have a listen.
I think Substack could be like 1,000 times the size of the existing like content.
Again, this is the guy that actually runs the show. So, okay, so I guess background in case people who don't know who that guy is. So this is Mark Andreessen, right? He is one of the two founding partners of Andreessen Horowitz. So obviously he's the Andreessen in Andreessen Horowitz, right? Andreessen Horowitz is probably the most significant, right? Venture capital firm, right? Or it is now, right? Venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. They've invested in pretty much, they were early investors in pretty much any of the major platforms, including Facebook, now Meta, including Airbnb, including Coinbase, including Stripe.
Right, okay.
Okay? So this is a heavy hitter. I mean, he's been around since he was one of the co-founders. He's the guy that created Netscape Navigator, like one of the people that created Netscape Navigator.
So he's been deep in the Silicon
Valley. So this
Valley.
is a serious operator. Now, other than that, right, he's like kind of like, the tech oligarch that a lot of people are not familiar with, but he also has very, very close ties to the Trump administration. He's like in the crowd of the tech bros with Musk, with Peter Thiel, with Alex Karp, all these guys, right? All the crypto bros as well. So we're talking about a heavy hitter. So basically, what people need to understand, when this guy calls the White House, he gets through to Trump. Like, he gave him a lot of money.
He doesn't get as much publicity as Musk and these other guys, but he seems like he's on their level.
He is 100% on their level. So I'm telling you again, when this guy calls the White House and asks to speak to the president, he gets the president. Right? Maybe even has his personal phone number. I don't know.
Right.
Right. That's without some of the recent revelations that came out from the Epstein dump, where let's just say that he's mentioned as well. I mean, that could be a podcast all by itself, but we're talking about a serious operator. So this is the actual brain. So forget about Chris Best and Amish McKenzie. They've invested their initial investment in Substack happened, I believe, in 2019, right? So Substack was created in 2017. In 2019, so Andreessen Horowitz, also known as A16Z, right? That's when they came on board. So they've been there from the get-go. Okay, so this is what we need to understand. Forget about Chris Best and Amish McKenzie. That is the actual brain. Now listen.
I think Substack could be like 1,000 times the size of the existing like content industry, whatever you want to call it, media news industry. The collective, kind of value. And the reason is because, and you're an example of this yourself. So, my whole life, so I'm like, in mid 50s. And so like I grew up, when I was a kid and teenager, the moral panic of the era was television. And it was just this like endless litany of sort of social criticism, from kind of, fancy people basically saying normal people are idiots. They just want to sit in front of the boob tube. They just want to like be couch potatoes. The line everybody used at the time was Americans watch 6 hours of TV a day, and then you turned on TV and you just saw this. They have this term, the vast wasteland of game shows and bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's just like this like very dystopian kind of thing of just like people are just morons. And then the internet version of that is, of course, that kind of moral panic is transferred straight over onto the internet in the form of of course short form videos, TikTok. So people just want to watch these stupid short form videos, and it's just
Cat's playing the piano was the original one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cat videos. By the way, I'm an aficionado of cat videos. I do not look down on cat videos whatsoever. AI cat videos are my current favorite genre of any form of entertainment. So I will.
The AI cat videos are very good.
I will. Yes, Ben can
look
confirm.
very
I send around a lot of AI cat videos. However,
Yes.
there is an enormous market for just like mass media, just for like whatever for whatever game shows or sitcoms or soap operas or their modern versions of those. And there's a giant mass media a market for cat videos, but. This goes back to this idea of supply-driven market. There's also, I think, just like enormous latent demand for actual smart, high-quality stuff, and particularly in media and in every kind of media. And I think the issue is not lack of demand. I think the issue is lack of supply. Because like this kind of goes back to kind of consumer marketing 101, which is people don't know what they want until it's given to them, right? Nobody ever asked for a Macintosh. Nobody ever asked for an iPhone. Like, these things had to be designed and built, provided on the supply side before the demand materialized. And then the demand, of course, turned out to be, far higher than anybody expected. And I think that same thing is exactly true of media. I think a great early existence proof of this was the success of long form podcasting. Which is, I remember my early conversations with some of the early long form podcasters, and they're like, it's the strangest thing we've ever seen, because everybody tells us that the consumers have short attention spans, but people are literally watching 3-hour podcasts, and we get the analytics, and people are watching all the way to the end of the 3-hour podcast. And so I view this very much as like, this is one of these classic markets that's a barbell, which is, yeah, you have a certain amount of, sort of mainstream, whatever, filler, whatever on the one side. But you have this massive sort of untapped market for high quality content in basically every domain. The existing structure of the media company was a structure that was designed for a world of centralized media. You need a new structure today, and of course that's why we're so high on Substack. But yeah, when we look at Substack, it's the exact same thing that you were just talking about Databricks, which is like, wow, this thing could be orders of magnitude multiples larger, than anything we've seen so far. And frankly, I think we're starting to see that.
Right. Okay. So what you need to understand, right, that Andreessen Horowitz, right, A16Z, they have a recipe that they've done many, many, many times before, right? What is their criteria? And you heard the guy in his own voice telling you that, right? And I'll play shortly another clip there where from the same interview where he explains that even a little bit further and really in your face. So their talent is identifying at the early stage companies in the tech space, right? That's their space. And also in the crypto space, they got into crypto now as well. So there's A16Z crypto that will dominate their niche, like dominate. That's why they got into Facebook. That's why they got into Stripe. That's why they got into Airbnb. That's why they got into Coinbase, right? You see, there's like a recurring theme here. So these guys are very good.
They pick the winners.
They are actually very, very smart. Actually, you know what? I wasn't planning on doing that, but I do want to play something that was released in just the recent Epstein dump, right? So this is a conversation that was recorded so it's a 2013 conversation between Epstein and Ehud Barak. You know who Ehud Barak is, right?
Yeah.
So Ehud Barak was finishing his role as Minister of Defense in Israel, and that was the time that he was basically leaving government for the last time and going into the private sector. And it was basically like, he came for advice and like, where he can like, get involved in what kind of business, right? In order basically, obviously, to secure his own financial future. Now have a listen. So Epstein gives him advice, right? And he mentions 2 companies by name, right? One is Palantir and Peter Thiel. And listen what the other one is. and what he says about them. Okay, so this is 2013. Yep. So first of all, Mark Andreessen, 47 mentions so far in the dump. That's actually interesting, right? So that's interesting. But anyway, let's have a listen.
He thought there was two cyber companies. Look out, and even though I know Peter, I've never met Peter Thiel, and everybody says he sort of jumps around and acts sort of strange, like he's on drugs.
Smoking, yeah. He looks under drugs.
However, he has a company called Palantir, Pallen. Tier, Palantir.
He butchers the name of Palantir and Peter Thiel, but anyway, that's not
Palantir is Peter Thiel's company, and look out.
Palantir, Palantir.
Yes.
How you write Thiel? Thiellly.
Thiel.
Lly.
No, Thiell.
Okay.
So he thought that Peter would put you on the board of Palantir. Peter Thiel is one of the best. I've never met him. He's going to come here next week. So I wanted to talk to him after I talked to you.
Okay.
He and Andreessen, it's called Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen Horowitz, they pay Larry $1 million a year.
So Larry is Larry Summers, right? Larry Summers came on as an advisor in 2011, I believe, right? And yeah, there's a link there in the note, but yeah, that's the Larry he's referring to, right? Larry Summers, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury.
Advisor.
Andreas and
Andreessen, Andreessen, and Horowitz.
and Howard.
Now listen what he says about them, right?
Horo, Horowitz.
What they are? It's a lobbyist. What they are doing?
They are the biggest venture capital people in Silicon Valley.
What, bigger than Sequoia or Kleiner
These are the new Kleiner Perkins. Everybody, these are the smart boys.
These are the smart boys, yeah?
So those two companies right away, in terms of, I said that we need now in the next 3 weeks if you're going to leave.
Right. Okay,
So that was Jeffrey Epstein talking to Ehud Barak.
Ehud Barak in a conversation 2013. It comes. It's an extract from a very long, I think the audio file itself, the full audio file is over 3 hours, and basically they were having lunch. I think it was at his home in New York. And one of the things that basically Ehud Barak came for his advice, okay, well, I'm leaving government in whatever 3 weeks, right? What can I do now? And obviously, I don't know if people know, but his net worth has exploded since then. He got involved into a few cyber companies that were sold to American companies. Anyway, we won't get into that. So what I'm trying to understand, what I'm trying to explain here is, forget about Chris Best and Hamish McKenzie. This is the brain. Now, the reason why they got into Substack, and he said that, right, in his own voice, right? He said that, that could be 100 times the existing content industry.
Yeah.
He said that, right? So he knows that Substack can dominate. So forget about Patreon, buy me a coffee. They can dominate just content in general, right? If they maintain the current business model, but definitely paid content, right? Premium content, absolutely dominate. And this is why it's important. Substack now, right, is exactly at the point that Facebook was before it exploded and became a dominant thing.
Oh, I see.
So, there was there was MySpace, and MySpace went under, and obviously Facebook benefited from that, but Facebook didn't explode immediately as MySpace collapsed. So we had Patreon, they were the first that introduced kind of that model, right? And then there were a few other, services, but Substack came and their thing was paid newsletters. We'll package everything into one thing, make it easier to use. And all we ask is 10% of the cut. So it's not even doesn't even cost you anything to use us. And obviously they got everyone in. But that's how they started. Now, during the pandemic, they had they've developed themselves a very, very good reputation of being free speech advocates, right? There were multiple cases. One prominent one I think happened in 2024, where there was clearly a coordinated campaign called Substackers Against Nazis, where basically the idea was that Substack was accused of allowing Nazis to monetize through their platform. And the purpose of that campaign, which was highly coordinated, there's no doubt about it, was basically for Substack to introduce much more strict content moderation policies.
Of course, yep.
Right? So that, like I say, oh, this is Nazi, this is this is that. You can't use Substack. And obviously, once you introduce censorship, I mean, it's a very slippery road. We know how that works. And Substack, to their credit, said, nah, we're not going to do that. Right? That's not our responsibility. And we are not the ones. We give them a platform to write. We don't actually collect the payment. If Stripe wants to ban them, that's their decision. But that's not our job. Right?
Okay,
so
yep, that makes sense.
And a big piece, and I think Amish McKenzie wrote that, and said, we're not going to do anything. So they came out of that looking really, really good. And obviously, even more people came because, I mean, obviously, the news out of that came out that, Substack did the right thing, and rightfully so, the news came out. So here's what I'm saying with that. So in the context of the current thing, first of all, Substack could say, specifically in Australia, I mean, in the UK, I mean, these are very, very, some of the things they can say, okay, well, we need clarification of what does it mean. Fine, we're not going to allow pornographic content. I think they don't allow anyway now, the content policies don't allow that anyway. But we need clarifications. What do you mean by hate content, right? And then we'll decide if we want to comply or not. Because again, we're an American company. We don't have any corporate presence or employees in the UK. So, if we don't like it, maybe we just won't comply. And, good luck. Try and find us. If you want to block us, that's fine, right? So they could have done that. In Australia, it's even more clear cut. Nobody told them anything.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything. They were not mentioned by anyone to anything under any circumstances. They boom, right? And they've introduced so without getting too much into that as well. But I mean, the company that they chose to use Persona for that thing, right? For the age verification, is very, very dodgy. We're talking seriously dodgy. And they are a giant that a lot of people never heard of until then. But they have a very extensive list of customers that they do the same for, which includes OpenAI and a few others, right? So people can go and have a look on their website. So this was obviously prepared well in advance, and then on the 10th of December, someone pressed a button, boom, right? And some of the stuff was completely nonsensical. So, for example, they never mentioned anything about restricting access to the chat room. Right. So what happened is people, maybe their Substack publication was not restricted, but their chat room was restricted. And subscribers in the chat room couldn't access the chat room without age verification. They couldn't access the chat room. They couldn't even receive direct messages, right? Unless they do the age verification. So that's, for example, I believe that's what happened to Doc Malik, right? Fairly sure that that's what happened to David Hughes as well, right? So why? What? How? Why? And then you say that paid subscribers are good, don't have to worry about it, and then they're not good, right?
Yeah. So when I listen to Andreessen talk there, I'm thinking he says long form content is very valuable, and that Substack could be hundreds of times bigger than other media. It sounds like he's actually very supportive of the vision of Substack. And that would imply, he said smart content. People like smart things. It's not just all short form content. So he's talking like he's just a believer in the platform and the idea of having this. But then I mean, is there any evidence that Andreessen himself is interested in censoring the content? Obviously Meta, Facebook, these other things did end up clamping down and controlling narratives and become very politicized. Is he just trying to profiteer from this versus you're saying he's the brain behind it? Obviously he's this huge investor.
The brain behind Substack. So he's the brain behind Substack. He's not just the brain. Forget about the brain. More importantly, he's the money. He's the money bag. Right? So forget about, the money bag doesn't necessarily have to be smart or not smart. I mean, this particular guy is very smart. Yeah. But he's the money bag, right? He's the one that keeps Substack is not profitable. Right? He keeps them going, right? Because he's playing the long, and you know what? That's actually, because that will probably clarify for you how he looks at Substack, right? So let me play another thing. And Again, from the same interview. Okay. So first of all, have a look at said. So that's like from another like conversation that he had. When I started to check the math with Andreessen, he made a jerking of motion and said, blah, blah, blah. We have all the models. We're elephant hunting, going after big game. Now let's have a listen to what he says here. Sorry, the audio here starts after a couple of seconds.
One of which is, I mean, the Substack investment. I remember at the time I was on Substack. My career was starting because of Substack, and I still, at the time, thought it was kind of a crazy
Right. So that's 2019 when Andreessen Horowitz got on board.
investment. Were you thinking about it from the perspective of this is going to be a great returner? This is something that is good for the future. Is it a mix of the two of those things? And then to what extent have you allowed Substack to fight that fight by being on their side that they wouldn't have been able to do if you weren't there?
Yeah, so we never make investments for just purely kind of social or political reasons. Like, so the goal obviously always is as sort of fiduciaries is to generate returns. And so, in the main business. And so we always invest with the intention that the company that we invest in, has the opportunity to become what we call kind of a cornerstone franchise, in the
Cornerstone franchise, yes.
industry and an important force in the world. We certainly believe that as Substack at the time, and we believe that more than ever today. So I think that's true. But I also think I think this is kind of the magic in a lot of what we do, in Silicon Valley, which is I think the companies in many, not in every case, but in many cases, the companies that become the best version of themselves also become the most successful businesses. And I think Substack is a great example of that. And Substack's actually a very, very, very good example of that, because if Substack is making its writers successful, then it's making itself successful, right? And so it's got this just like extremely direct alignment of interest between its success and its writer success.
So here's what he's not saying. Yes, direct alignment, right? And a lot of people that have been impacted by that will tell you that what I'm about to say is the truth. It also creates another thing. It creates dependency, because moving your paid subscription business elsewhere, depending on your setup, and we can discuss that, is, especially if you're not a technical person, maybe sound like a very formidable task, like an intimidating thing to do, and people are concerned. Obviously, they're going to lose their revenue, right? So it creates dependency, right? Just like Stripe creates dependency, just like Airbnb creates dependency for those who list their properties on Airbnb to list as holiday rentals, right? Just like Coinbase, especially if you use their merchant facilities for crypto, right? Creates dependency. So you understand there is a recipe. These are what Epstein is saying. These are smart boys. He knows what he's saying. They are smart boys. So their idea.
And then as a consequence of that, if its writers are successful, kind of by definition, those writers, readers are successfell. They're getting what they want. Right. And so, I would say, there were sort of a bunch of reasons we invested in Substack. One was just, we fell in love with the guys. And you probably know the guys, they're easy to fall in love with. So that was the easy part. And then, look, I had been around, we had been around, the web going all the way back. And then, particularly the kind of golden age of blogging, was kind of this kind of very, special time. And blogging really, I think, maybe gets underestimated because maybe there was no single company that kind of got full credit for it or something. But, it really the phenomenon of blogging created an enormous amount of intellectual content, that basically was not going to exist otherwise.
Yeah. So that's to answer your question that you just asked me. So this is a public interview, right? Andreessen is not going to come and say in an interview, okay, we've created this platform, right, to dominate, to become a honeypot, and then we're going to do a rug pull. He's not going to say that.
Right, yeah.
Even if that was the plan from the beginning. But he's hinting to you, saying okay, well, we invested in Substack because we knew it can dominate. It become a dominant thing, and it can create dependency for people who are on that platform.
So
just like they've done with any other investment that they've done, when people created there was the early age of Facebook, where people said, oh, well, I'll just have my Facebook page, right? I don't need a website. I don't need a mailing list. I don't need anything. Facebook. And then you can't reach your followers, right? Unless you pay.
Yeah. And then the advertising.
People don't know that. So people don't know that. So the Substack is also like, they are about to introduce ads. They will introduce ads. It's unclear yet how it's going to look like and whether it's going to be like in the publications themselves, or it's also going to be in the note feed, and whether it's going to be opt-in or opt-out, or maybe you'll have to pay to like opt out of having like, ads displayed on your publication, right? And again, like they said they're going to do that, but they didn't say like the reason, right? Like, Chris Best is not going to come out and say, okay, well, look, we're not profitable and our investors are not happy. So they said, look, you guys need to diversify your income streams. Otherwise, we're going to have problems because we're kind of sick and tired of waiting for you to become like, profitable, right? Also keep in mind that like, Andreessen may have like, a different end game, and it's the same end game that like, they did with Facebook Meta, which is IPO. So like, even if it doesn't, like, even if Substack never becomes profitable under their like, stewardship, under their investment, but becomes dominant in their niche, IPO, they get an exit, huge multiples on what they invested. Obviously, Amish and Chris Best and the CTO, I don't remember his name now. Like, I mean, all the three co-founders, obviously, they're gonna get a nice, like, payout, right? And maybe they stay, maybe they go into other things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is not like rocket science. This is how like the tech space works.
Right.
Like,
So all the warning signs are there that this is
Exactly.
following the template of these other things. And even if you could argue, that Coinbase is doing just fine, people are making money from it. Meta, people make money from it. These things, Uber makes money. These things are successful, and these guys are not trying to destroy or sabotage the platform, but they're all, by doing this age verification thing where they're not even required to do it, it is a very suspicious movement where they're going against their own principles, and as you pointed out, straight up lying, which is bizarre and should be concerning, and they need to be called out for that. That they have their biggest investor, their sort of, I don't know, I guess unofficial director is essentially what Andreessen would be, that he's seeing this as a dominant thing, and yet he's allowing, or I don't know if we could speculate that he would have pushed them to actually do the age verification thing. But in any case, he would be he'd be allowing this sort of betrayal of the basic principle of Substack, which is to not censor and to just sort of let people say what they want. And it's not being seen yet in Canada and America. And so there's not a lot of panic around it because people are like, well, that's an Australian law. And then I remember that the Australian legislators were very proud of this law, and they were saying that would also be a template that would be moved around everywhere. Just instead of saying it's a digital ID rollout, say that it's a safe child safety age verification law, and then that allows you to get around the whole discussion that this is just about government censorship and monitoring. It's just about protecting kids, and the lie that if you have a credit card or you already have sort of other evidence your account is old enough that you must be a certain age, you're not going to be affected. I mean, that actually reduced my fears around it. I said, well, okay, that's kind of common sense. But if the evidence is all pointing that that's a lie and that they're actually still just going to strategically target people, dissidents especially, and certain features just get locked, it's basically just a smoke screen to be able to do what they otherwise would create a lot of they wouldn't have any rationale, because as you said, they don't fit into these other categories of hate speech or violence or pornography or anything like that. So now they can just sort of say, well, it's age verification. It's not like we're saying that you're banned, your audience just has to verify themselves, but that's enough friction and enough. Do you think on that point, because that's kind of the next thing I'm wondering is, do you think that age verification, they know it's going to be so unpopular that it's going to kill these people's popularity? Or do you think it's more to say, well, we want people to do age verification, and so we're going to gatekeep certain content from people so that people get on board with the digital ID or the age verification?
Yeah, good question. Look, here's my thoughts about it. I mean, you can never, the same thing, like, whether, like, it was Andreessen's idea to introduce that or not. Like, you have, like, there's no way to know for sure, right? It's not going to come out and publicly and say, this is my order. I told them to do that, right? But you can do what's called pattern recognition, and you can look at other things that have happened before, right? So with stuff like that, the age verification is clearly and evidently a trial balloon to see if people will agree, like, to papers, please, in order to access the internet. There's no doubt about it. And the way that Persona does that, right? You can't just, like, well, I'll give you my passport number and expiry date, and you verify through the government database that it exists and that person is, no. Well, selfie, biometrics.
Right.
Either provide biometrics or piss off. Right? That was the thing that was, like, so jarring about it, right?
Because then it's clearly not about verifying age. It's just about getting biometrics, creating databases, connecting them, and then linking it directly into platforms. It's so odd that they don't do something like the list of platforms they're doing it on and not doing it on also seems odd, because you'd think that Discord, for example, like there's crazy, illegal, horrible stuff that happens on Discord with kids, suicide cults and, like, basically grooming gangs and all sorts of really horrible stuff on Discord. Roblox has such a history of child predators going on there and grooming kids. And for some reason, they're not concerned about that. But they're going to these huge platforms, and it's almost like I don't understand the line.
Excellent example. Telegram is like, it falls under Messenger, but obviously there's, like, Telegram groups, and those are, I can tell you, like, as a cybersecurity guy, these are dangerous. Those are, like, very dangerous places. Like,
Right.
if you're not, like, savvy, you can easily be infected with malware. Like, hacker groups operate on Telegram. That is, like, their platform of choice, right? And they even distribute, like, malware automatically, like, through Telegram chat rooms, right? So Telegram is a very dangerous place. But
So
kids are welcome. Yeah.
What is the line that they are drawing here? Because it is they're carving out a part of the internet, and you can imagine it's just going to expand. Like you said, it's a trial, and it's going to keep getting bigger, and more countries will start adopting it, and then there'll be a network effect of suddenly most countries have this, and then it's affecting more platforms, and it squeezes more and more like a noose that's slowly tightening. But, like, why wouldn't they just go right for something like Steam or Discord or Roblox? Is there a problem with trying to implement it there, do you think? Or do you think it's just they're trying not to upset too many people and sort of turn up the heat slowly?
Yeah, that's it. So implementation is not an issue, because even if a platform doesn't have a built-in solution, they can always get Persona.
Right.
Simple API integration, done. No problem, right? So that's not an issue. Even, like, any platform can do that. Like, again, to give you another example, I mean, Twitter, right? I mean, Twitter is specifically designated in Australia, but not Blue Sky. Not like, like some of the other ones, Gab is not the, what like. So basically, like, it seems like they plucked it out of, like, thin air. And so here's the thing. The idea is like, it's like the the chicken in the pot, like, slowly warm it up so that, like, the chicken doesn't realize, or the frog, sorry, that it doesn't realize that it's being cooked.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. So as I said, like, we can't know for sure, but we can look at patterns, right? So in Australia, when the pandemic started, right, even before the injectables were available, the government was encouraging people to sign in, like, wherever they go. Like, just, it was like a sign-in sheet. You go to a cafe or a restaurant and sign in that you've arrived at, like, what time, and then another time. So, like, for contact tracing purposes, right? That was, like, getting people used to, like, signing in, right? And then they created apps where basically you don't have to, like, maintain a paper, like the business doesn't have to maintain, like, a sign-in sheet. You just scan a QR code. It goes to some centralized database, right? Now, later on, when the injectables came and the mandates were introduced, those very same apps, right? They were added, like they added functionality to them, and each state had its own app, but they were all operating the same way. Each of those apps, there was an integration added to the vaccination database where people could download their vaccination certificate and show that to the same app.
Right.
So you understand how it works? So this is like, you know, this is how the term for that, right? The good term for that to describe that is incrementalism. Incrementalism, or death by 1,000 cuts, if you want to call it that way, right? So that is what is happening here. So this is a trial. The reason why they chose those platforms is obviously because they're very popular, right? And maybe some people are dependent on that, and maybe the creators that are on these platforms and monetize to that, they're definitely dependent, right? So okay, well, are they going to comply or are they going to leave? Same thing with Substack. Are they going to comply or are they going to leave? Right? And then we say, okay, well, okay, because it's the same thing with the vaccine mandates. I mean, it gave them data. Okay, how compliant are people? How far we can push them? What can we get away with? This is the same thing. The next step is digital ID to access the internet, full stop. The step after that is digital ID to leave. And then obviously you put your, like, you know, CBDC, stablecoins, whatever you want to call them, they're all the same thing. And again, and I've said that in multiple interviews, and it's worth repeating. The digital ID is not like the vaccine, right? It's not something, okay, well, look, this one didn't work out. The mandates didn't work out. We'll try something else. If they manage to ram this through, it is done. We have lost the war. It is done. We are done.
Because the digital ID I've written about this too, because I'm kind of tired of people talking about digital ID as if it's going to be one sudden thing that just appears and has a single thing. It's the entire infrastructure of, or not the entire infrastructure, but it's a feature that can be put into all infrastructure, and it can have multiple different forms, and it can be at completely surprising checkpoints that you wouldn't expect. You know, a transaction at a certain store, and then another time to sign into an app, and then another time to get across a road or whatever. Like there could be a very sort of random assortment. Some places could, you know, in order to sign in to go to your workplace, if you have a job, you could have to sign in to verify things. Insurance companies could force
that you have the right to work, right? That you're not illegal, right? Or maybe like to verify your qualification. Anything, your license, if you're not, you know, in something like an electrician that requires licensing, anything, right? So that's okay. And you made a very, very good point. So people think that, like, you know, it's going to be like the vaccine mandate. All of a sudden there's vaccine mandate. Okay, well, you know, in Canada, you know, if you're a trucker, you can't cross to the United States unless you have proof of vaccination, right? That's what caused, like, you know, the Freedom Convoy initially. That's not how it's going to work. Right. And I encourage people in the UK. The UK actually has given us a very, very good example, because Starmer floated that idea of, like, you know, the digital brick card. And that's going to be, like, you know, the digital ID that's going to rule them all. And it was a psyop. It was a diversion. I very strongly recommend people read the work of Ian Davis. And there's another British guy by the name of Miles Harris. Right. He's done a lot of YouTube videos on that topic, where basically they explain to you, look, this is a diversion. They want you to focus on defeating the digital brick card while the actual infrastructure, like the real one, is being built. And same thing is happening in Australia, right? To something called, it used to be called MyGov ID, and then it was changed to My ID. So this is like the actual, like, digital ID scheme, right? The government run digital ID scheme, and again, I'm not gonna get too much into that, but basically at the moment, right, it is one of the options to log into the main government portal, but you can still log in with the username and password. But like simple implementation, like, you know, 3-4 days to make that change to the system, no email and password. My ID or piece off. You don't have my ID, well, you can't access the government portal. And that's already been done to some extent, because in Australia there's what's called the director ID. So anyone who's a director of a company, right, is required, supposedly, it's not really well enforced, I think, but supposedly they're required to get a director ID. And there's multiple ways of getting a director ID. You can still go through, like, you can call them, or you can fill out a paper form, right? So that option is still available. But if you want to do it online, you have to get my ID first and reach a verification strength of a certain thing, which basically depends on how many documents you've presented, right, to create the digital ID, right? But again, very, very easy. Say, oh, look, the paper stuff is not secure and it's lost, it takes a long time. No, can't do that anymore. So either that or no director ID for you. Right. So that's what, and again, it's the same everywhere. I mean, it's not rocket science. The names are different. Like, the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but it's all the same.
Well, I was just looking up while you were mentioning that I remember that India, although nobody talks about India, they have one of the world's largest digital ID systems. They consider it to be
the largest and the longest running.
It's considered a massive success. Keir Starmer has said that he's praising it, that it's a good example, because one of the things is, you don't, I guess every Indian resident has a 12-digit number. It's linked to demographic and biometric information. It says its stated aim was to eliminate duplication in welfare distribution and make the system more efficient. So you can see how even somebody like an Elon Musk, who wants government efficiency and we need to cut out the waste and fraud and abuse, there's a lot of ways they could approach this and dress it up for conservatives and people who would generally be against any sort of government control. And then especially if they do it through corporations and services, and it's not technically the government. That's sort of this whole fake libertarian thing that is going on everywhere in Silicon Valley now, where big tech is obviously a public-private partnership, government, State Department operation, basically, but they get to launder it through these private corporations, and then they can say, well, it's not the government doing it, it's this service, and if they have problems, you can take it up with them. It's not your representative. You don't need to change any laws. It's just change your provider or whatever. And so this can come in many forms. But something like India, the fact that I don't know how long it has been going on. I just remember hearing about this quite a while ago. And the UK this is from November of last year, just a couple months ago, praising their digital ID system and saying that is Keir Starmer, according to this article, says that it's central to modernizing the welfare state and tightening immigration controls. And so what is bigger in the news than immigration and all this stuff? So Substack, I can see now how that's fitting into just this whole framework. They basically want to, I'm picking up here that they would want to just basically, especially because they're voluntarily doing it in Australia, without a government mandate. That was sort of the whole reason why I saw your posts constantly talking about killing Substack, and I'm like, how can you blame these guys for going along with it if it's the law? But the fact that they're doing it voluntarily now, it does indicate that they know this is going to be a huge platform, so they may as well already promote this selectively, strategically, test it out, see how people react, hopefully normalize it. And that's why your push is to say, kill Substack, get an alternative going, migrate your followers somewhere else, and somewhere that presumably this law wouldn't affect, which is interesting, because the whole thing kind of depends on public outrage to stop this, because like you said, and like we're seeing in India, it's not like it's just big tech platforms that are doing this. It is government agencies around the world with welfare and immigration and UK's work digital ID requirements. So Substack is, in this situation, a very interesting red flag that that points to even this intellectual, freedom-oriented blogging publication platform being compromised. And so to take a stand here already now, before it gets that bad and all the countries are doing it, I think it does need to, we do need to raise the alarm around it. And then I just wonder, I've heard you suggest a couple of alternatives where people can take their followers, different ways of doing payment, I'm assuming, than Stripe. So talk a little bit about that and what you think is already in place. I remember, obviously it didn't end up being a success, but I remember, if you remember Minds, the social media platform, I was a huge proponent of that when that was new. Decentralized, you own your own content. They had all the features you could want, video and chats and everything. It was a very robust platform. It still technically exists. But it never caught on. So what do you think, or another example, because you were talking about this being like I saw in a different interview you did, that you were talking about how it could essentially replace TV networks and production companies and stuff, that if you had enough people willing to pay for being part of some sort of alternative media platform like this, that it could dwarf traditional media. And you're saying, you could basically have production houses working within this an alternative platform. And it reminded me of Mega Upload, Kim.com, and how they got to a certain point. They had all this piracy on Mega Upload where people could share videos, and they were uploading TV series and movies and stuff there, but they legally were in New Zealand or whatever, and so they were there's a whole legal situation there. But in the end, the FBI went to New Zealand and raided his home and kidnapped him and seized all of his stuff. And that was a guy, he was just on the cusp of creating a legitimate alternative. Mega Upload was going to become legitimate and make deals with all these major publishers, publishing companies, Universal and NBC, and these music artists and labels. And right as he was trying to turn it from a sort of just a media hosting site to being sort of the Netflix model, with all these legitimate partners, somebody made a call, and that was a completely illegal operation. They violated his rights. They just stole the stuff. And I just think of that as an example of how extreme it can get if somebody creates a good alternative that looks like it's going to catch on. So how do you think an alternative could simultaneously grow big enough to challenge this hegemony that is coming out and wants to control, through all these different platforms like Andreessen does, and yet avoid sort of the grim fate of somebody like a Kim.com, where eventually they just literally come in and illegally steal all of your servers and arrest you and keep you in hell for years and years and years fighting legal battles and that kind of stuff.
Sure. All right. So you raised, there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. So you've raised three things that I want to address. Let's start from the first one and then move forward. So just with the India scheme, right? So the India scheme is called Aadhaar. I'm quite familiar with that because I actually had on my podcast an Australian engineer by the name of Paul Conlon, right? Who actually wrote a book about digital ID and its dangers. And as part of that, a big part of the book is a case study about what happened in India with the rollout of this system called Aadhaar. So Aadhaar was rolled out in 2016, right? And under the pretext of preventing welfare fraud, right? And I think initially it wasn't necessarily biometric, and then biometrics were introduced because a lot of people in India didn't have paperwork and stuff like that. And Aadhaar now has 99% adoption amongst the adult Indian population.
Wow.
So we're talking 1.2 billion people in a country that is not necessarily there's a lot of people living in remote areas, they don't have internet. They're not it's not Japan,
right?
It's not South Korea, right? So this is what we need to understand. So India is as well and truly in trouble, right? And it also happens to be a BRICS nation. So that's homage to all the people who are saying, oh yeah, the BRICS are fighting the globalists. Yeah, cool. All right. Cool, mate. Yeah. Cool story, bro. So that's one thing. Now, the second point is about killing Substack. So here's the thing. Here's what I'm trying to say here. And this is why timing is crucial. So a big reason of why Substack has become the giant that it is during, like, since the 2020s, right? Since 2020, is because of their free speech stance. So you could argue, and I think it will be a fair argument to make, right, that it is us, the anti-vaxxers, right, both the authors and the readers, who have made the platform what it is now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, right? Since then, like now Keir Starmer is on Substack, right? All the legacy media hacks, they're on Substack, right? So things have changed since then. But initially, like, in 2021, 2022, 2023, when I read stuff on Substack for like, a year and a half before I started my own, right? And I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is content that you literally cannot find anywhere else. Like, this is mind-blowing stuff, especially in the heydays of the mandates, and like, people were posting like, videos about what's in the vaccine and like injuries and wild stuff, right? Like something literally. So I argue, right, that we have made the platform what it is now. And as I said before, we are at a very, very critical juncture point now, right? Just before Substack is about to go to the moon, right? Become the Facebook of newsletters and like, really of paid content, be it written, audio, video, full control, right? So unless like they have a dominant position, right? But they don't fully dominate, right? So basically, like, if you want to have like a paid newsletter, right, and have audience for that, you have to go to Substack, right? It's not there yet exactly, but it is getting very, very close. So that's one point. The second point is Substack has at the moment a different business model than something like Facebook, right? Facebook, obviously, like, they've ads in the feed. They collect as much data as they can about you and then sell it to advertisers, like all other social media platforms. But Substack works on revenue share, right? So basically, they take 10% cut of any payment that goes through, like, through their system, all right? So if people stop, like, going on notes, for example, doesn't really affect them that much. Like, if they keep paying for their Substack publications, and if the Substack authors, like, keep collecting the payments through Substack, nothing happens.
Right.
So this is why it is imperative, right? And I have a very detailed article that explains, based on different scenarios, how you can do that, and we can discuss some of that. It's imperative that we act now, because Substack is it's going on this like trajectory where we will not be able to kill it. And there is a reason why there's two reasons why we need to kill it. One is to make an example of it and say, okay, well, any other platform that is not huge, that is not Facebook yet, right? Like, for example, Rumble, for example, Odyssey, be careful. You attracted us, promising us freedom and free speech. Be careful. If you betray us, we will go to town on you. We will annihilate you. We will make it our mission to destroy you. So think carefully how you approach this as, like, the government, like, crackdown, like, gets worse and worse, right? So that is one thing. The other thing, and that is the most important point, and again, I don't have, like, I can't show you a document to prove that, but based on pattern recognition, it becomes fairly obvious that Substack, potentially from the very beginning, but definitely, like, from the beginning of the pandemic, was created to be a honeypot. Do you know what a honeypot is?
I just know it in sort of the legal idea of cops or law enforcement or the FBI creating a situation that's supposed to attract criminals so that they can catch them.
Exactly. I mean, I can give a better example maybe from the cybersecurity space, right, which I'm more familiar with. So a honeypot is basically you put a server, right, on the perimeter of your network, right, that has, like, has known vulnerabilities on purpose. Doesn't actually have, like, real important information, but does have information that looks like it is important. or looks like it's authentic, like customer data and stuff like that. And then you hope that hackers will attack that server, right? For two reasons. First of all, so they waste their efforts and resources on attacking that server instead of attacking your actual network. And the second thing is, okay, to analyze how they operate. What are they doing? What information are they looking at? How they're breaching that particular server, right? And that gives you an idea of their modus operandi, like how do they operate, right? So that's the idea of a honeypot. So to our example here, as I said before, the idea was to attract all the dissident writers into one platform, create a financial dependency, right? Because people have built significant paid subscriber base.
Yeah.
Right. And leaving it now becomes they're dependent on it. Like a lot of people who they're dependent on it because they also lost their other jobs. They're like this is their livelihood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're gonna introduce things that you're not gonna like. And then your options are either comply or leave, and then potentially lose that revenue.
Yeah.
That is the thing. Now, why do I say that that's the case? Because based on pattern recognition, this is exactly what happened with Twitter 2.0 or X under Musk. X under Musk, I think anyone can see that now. I mean, unless you really don't understand what's going on. X was a honeypot. Is a honeypot. It is a honeypot.
I deleted it as soon as Elon Musk introduced the paid check mark, and he was saying so clearly he wanted it to be the everything app. He was comparing it to WeChat, and I'm like, wow, he's just telling us right in the open that this is just the start, that his however many billions he paid for it, it wasn't because he thought Twitter was going to be the free speech future and it was going to he was going to help humanity or something like that. He was literally saying out loud that it was supposed to be the everything app, which would absolutely have to include some sort of digital ID verification stuff. So I deleted it right then already. So it's a good comparison.
That's and yeah, I mean, I can play the video, but I'm not going to play it. But I mean, everyone has seen this video where he says that, and he even said that his whole idea, the social media aspect of X, that's just the side hustle. That's just to attract the users. The idea is to replace, to use his words, half of the financial system. X could be half of the global financial system. He said that. So the idea is, and again, WeChat started as a messenger, and then there were social media aspects added to it. But now in China, you cannot live without WeChat. There's no cash.
Mm-hmm.
You can't order a taxi. You can't pay for food in many places. Right? So that based on that, I can say, based on pattern recognition, I can quite confidently conclude that Substack is a honeypot and potentially has been from the very, very beginning, definitely from the beginning of the pandemic, right? Especially because if you look at what Andreessen Horowitz, what they do and what else they invest in and how they operate, and Mark Andreessen said in his own words, I played that, we said, we invested in Substack because we knew they have the potential to dominate the niche. Yeah. And now obviously they have. And soon enough, they will reach a point where they will not only be dominating the niche, they'll be dominant to such an extent you cannot destroy them, right? If they become a publicly listed company, it's very, very hard to destroy a publicly listed company, because a publicly listed company can raise money, they're not reliant on VC, that once they're publicly listed company, they don't rely on venture capital. They just can issue more shares. Mm-hmm. They can do whatever, they can do a capital raise at the drop of a hat. So this is why I'm saying that this is a crucial point. Now, okay, so now let's get to your third point about what we do. And this is the approach that I advocate, and that requires a complete shift in thinking. And it can be summed up as protocols instead of platforms. Even when you were asking the question, you kept saying platform. So Minds is a decentralized platform, or not platform. Minds is running on a certain protocol that allows it to be decentralized, but it is not a platform, right? Because a platform can be shut down. Protocol cannot. Protocol is the plumbing. It's it's like it's like what makes like a certain thing, like, if you turn off protocols, like it's like electricity, right?
Yeah, and
So
it's almost like the language that the platforms speak. It
correct.
doesn't. It's not the platform itself, but it's the thing that enables all the features to work. And I remember an exchange that we had on Substack notes or whatever. Maybe it was in a comment section, but we were talking. I was saying how much I love RSS feeds and emails, and those are both very like stripped down protocols. Like
Right.
and there's a reason why they're so robust. And I hated that RSS feeds and RSS readers basically went extinct with the rise of social media. I used to have an RSS reader that was, I think I had 30 or 40 sources I was getting, and I just opened up a tab in my browser. I didn't even have to go to a website, and I would get all the news I wanted. And then Google completely shut down their RSS reader feature, and it was almost like it just went extinct. But that protocol still has to exist, right?
The protocol never goes anywhere unless you like, nuke the entire. Okay, so this is what people need to understand. So people now look and like, people like, especially that have been using the internet, like say for the last 15 years only and something like that. They look at the internet as this huge collection of platforms, like big platforms that if you want to search, you go to Google. If you want to watch a video, you go on YouTube. If you want to like, talk to your friends, you go on Messenger. If you want to like, watch cat videos, you go on Facebook, whatever, right? And people think that this is the internet. Like I've met people, right, who think that Google is the internet. Like they think Google is the internet. So when I go on the internet, and what do you mean by going on the internet? Oh, well, there's this like logo that says Google. So,
And they don't even know. They don't know what a browser is.
They don't even understand what an internet is. So, okay. So for the benefit of those people, and as well for like, the older folk like us who maybe have been using the internet in the 90s, right? We need to refresh our memory what the internet is, right? The internet is a network of networks that is run by protocols. That's it. That's the internet. It's a decentralized network comprised of like, smaller sub-networks that connect with each other through common protocols. That's the internet. That's what it was always designed. The internet was created to be resilient, right? Because it was initially like, a DARPA project that was like, meant to be an emergency communication network. And in order for that to be resilient, it was created to be decentralized. It was never meant to be this like thing that we have now, that you have like, several like huge platforms that dominate and 3 public cloud providers that dominate the whole thing, right? This has predominantly happened. I mean, even if you look at the 90s, right? Look at how many search engines we had in the 90s. I don't know if you used the internet in the 90s compared to what we have now. I mean, we had Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves and all these like,
I use Dogpile.
Excite, all these like random stuff, And then what happened? Then the tech crash happened in the early 2000s. And a lot of these like services went kaput. And the ones that survived became behemoths and became like dominant. Right? And then
And
like,
they all suspiciously had government backdoor deals, and the CIA funded them.
Exactly. I mean, Facebook literally was like, started the day after the CIA, the DARPA program of the same, like, I think total information awareness, something like that. Don't remember, but LifeLog, that's it. Yeah. So I mean, so that's what we need to understand. So we've allowed a rug pull to happen, right, on the entire internet, and it is our fault, right? We have nobody else to blame, right? Because people thought, okay, well, instead of like, catching up with my friends in real life or maybe exchanging emails or like, calling them or sending an SMS, I can just go on Facebook and see everything that's happening. And if you're not on Facebook, you don't exist, right? I mean, people like, people coordinate like plans and like, have all these like group chats on Messenger and stuff like that, and send each other like, their baby photos and who knows what else, right? Yeah. On a platform, literally they read everything.
And they have cloud storage so that you don't have to send files.
And everything is
manually.
kept forever. Yeah. And so I was about to say, so when the cloud computing thing came, so initially, like, it was unclear who's going to dominate, but it was quickly became evident that, like, if you can master a lot of resources and you can reach scale, you can dominate. And that's
Mhm.
how we reach the point where we have 3 cloud providers, right? Microsoft, Google, and AWS, Amazon Web Services, who dominate because they reach the scale, right? So that's what we need to understand. We need to understand that we have forgotten what the internet actually is. The
So what are the
internet,
protocols? Let's try
yep.
to like talk about what some of these protocols would be that allow us to bypass Substack, get payments to still be made, and um, dodge the crackdown if they wanted to crack down. That somehow you could evade that because even something
So,
like an email provider, I have Proton Mail. It's like, okay, that's the secure one. That's supposed to be not corrupt or whatever. But they could just as that's a platform or a service provider. It's not like I'm just somehow using the protocol of email without an intermediary. So it's like you
mm,
need to have a portal to somehow log in and to somehow interact
mm,
with this stuff, don't you?
okay, yeah, good point. All right, so yes, when you send an email or receive an email through your Proton account, obviously you interact with protocols, right? There's a protocol for sending, right? SMTP, and then there's 2 for receiving, POP3 and IMAP, right? So that's the protocols. That's the plumbing. That's like the electricity that's running through the wires, right? But your access to these protocols is facilitated through Proton, but it doesn't have to be. You can run your own email server. And it's actually not that hard, right? There's even for email marketing now, there is a open source software that allows you to do it yourself. Multiple actually products that you basically install on a server, right? And you can run it yourself, right? So yes, in your particular example, yes, Proton is the one that facilitates, right, your access to those protocols through its platforms, right? So you interact with protocols through Proton's platform, but that doesn't have to be the case, right? And Proton can restrict access to your email account, but it cannot restrict your access to email full stop. If you lose
Sure.
your Proton account, you can go somewhere else and set up an email. Like obviously, you need to let people know that you're now on another, have a different email address, right? Same thing with you lose your mobile number for whatever reason, and then you go to another mobile number, and you can still access SMS, right? You can still access voice. You can still do that. You can still access the internet because it is a protocol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what people need to understand. Now, so for some specific examples, so there is a protocol that has been around for quite some time now, but has recently reached a level of maturity and I guess a level that allows people to tap directly into it without relying on external platforms, and that's ActivityPub. So the social web, right? Things like Mastodon, PeerTube, PixelFed, Ghost, right? WordPress, if you install the plugin, right? They can interact with the ActivityPub protocol. Now, the ActivityPub protocol, the best way to explain that is a 2-way RSS, right? So RSS is you just pull content from different websites or podcasts. Podcasts also run on RSS, obviously. ActivityPub, you can also push your content, right? So you can pull, you can read content through other people that you follow through that protocol, and people who follow you can read your content, right? So you can push it through the ActivityPub protocol as well, right? And in order to access ActivityPub, right, you can have a Mastodon account, right? And there's multiple instances. Each one has their own rules. Same goes with PeerTube, same goes with PixelFed. But you can also run a Ghost website that has that built in. Or you can run a WordPress website and install the ActivityPub plugin, and you can tap directly into the protocol. So in simple terms, instead of having an account on a platform, you have your own platform. You're actually running an instance. You're running a server yourself. You cannot be banned from that instance or from that server because it's yours. You control it. Right? So that's the power of that. Right?
So I looked into Ghost just yesterday, and it looked just at this on the surface like a almost perfect replacement for Substack in terms of features and what it could be. But you're saying that, and I also didn't you at some point say that Substack, there's a way to use it in which you basically link to an RSS feed. You could still get people's content without really using the platform. And I think that like Ghost, like am I wrong that could also, does that not have the same sort of backer thing because you own it? There's nothing, they couldn't censor you. People have extremist views on there, or they did something that was literally illegal. I imagine they have to be able to moderate it somehow, don't they? Or is the individual putting out the content, because they're just using the protocol, are they just responsible and they would have to reach out to that person directly and deal with them if the government wanted to, law enforcement wanted to do something to them, or how would that work?
Okay. So again, there's multiple things here. Let's answer the first question first around Substack. So every Substack publication, and I think a lot of people don't know that, every Substack publication actually does have an RSS built in. So people can follow RSS publications, right, through RSS and get articles as like through an RSS reader. So that is built in. Every Substack publication has an RSS field built in, and people can look up in the the exact, I think it's basically your Substack address /feed or /RSS. I don't remember, but something along those lines, and you put it into any RSS reader and you can follow it. So that's true. Same goes, by the way, for every channel on Odyssey. So every channel on Odyssey has a built-in RSS feed, right, that you can put into a podcast listening app, right? So it can be like you can literally use that as a podcast, like directly. Okay, so again, people don't know that. Now, okay, so that's the first part. Let's get to the second part. Ghost is not a platform. Ghost is an open source piece of software, just like WordPress. So nobody owns the software. Now, there's two, just like with WordPress, there's two ways to run the software, right? So you can go WordPress, for example, right, offers WordPress.com, which is a managed hosting service for WordPress that you can run your WordPress to them. Now, WordPress, the software, right, is not a platform. It's open source software.
I've actually used that in the past.
WordPress.com is a platform.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people need to understand. Same goes with Ghost. So Ghost has something. So the Ghost software, it's software. You can download it for free. It's free. It's open source for software, just like Linux, right? Linux is not a platform. It's software, right? So with Ghost, the Ghost Foundation, which is the custodian of the Ghost project, they run a managed hosting service called Ghost Pro, where you can host your Ghost through them. But you don't have to. And depending on your use case, I don't. And depending on your use case, it may be better for you to either completely self-host on your own machine, right? Or go through another managed hosting provider, which is what I do, right? So there's options there. So the software is not a platform, right? So nobody can come to Ghost, right, and say censor that person, right, because they're using your software. We have no control over that. Now, if you're hosting with Ghost Pro, and they can say, and they have a lot of rules about it. Actually, you can have a read at their terms of service, extremist content, whatever. Yeah, they can ban you because Ghost Pro is a platform.
Yeah.
Just like WordPress.com is a platform. Okay, so that's what people need to understand. Okay, so the government can't come to, if I'm take an extreme example, right? If I'm hosting, if I download Ghost, I'm running it on my own server in my garage, right, and connecting to the internet to however I connect, right? Nobody can come and go to Ghost and say ban this person, right? Or if I'm posting something through my Ghost instance on ActivityPub and people say, oh, this is an extremist view, they can't come and say ban this person because it is my server, it is mine, right? The most they can do is block my account from appearing in their either at the platform, at the instance
Discovery
level.
something or other. Yeah.
Correct. So basically, my stuff will not show up, right? Whatever, they can do that. Discovery works a little bit different. There's no algorithm in ActivityPub. Like it's not algorithmic, right? So it's just like, just like RSS, it's like chronological, right? So that's the big difference, right? Substack, you cannot self-host Substack.
Right,
Substack is a platform, right? Now, the main difference, there's a couple of differences between Ghost and WordPress, okay? So Ghost has a lot of the features that Substack has built in, which include sending email newsletters, which include collecting payments, like, subscriptions, people sign up for paid subscriptions, which includes paywalls, like, paywalling your content. And also Ghost has something that Substack doesn't have. So you can have content that is only accessible to your members free or paid. Right? So you have to sign into your member account on the website in order to read the content. The justification behind it primarily now, in my opinion at least, is to prevent AI LLMs from scraping your content. Okay? So that's one. So you don't necessarily want to charge people to read that, but you want to ensure that the content is only accessible to humans.
That's an interesting feature.
Right? So Ghost has all of that built in, like out of the box. WordPress does not, right? The basic WordPress install doesn't have any of that. You can achieve that by installing certain plugins and doing all sorts of all that sort of stuff. So that's the difference. Another difference is the hosting requirements for Ghost, right? Are higher than running a WordPress website. So you cannot run Ghost on a shared hosting, like a server, whatever you pay, $5 a month or whatever, and it's like on a cPanel, right? You can't run it like that, right? You need to have at least a virtual private server, or if you're using a cloud platform, could be something called like a virtual machine or Droplet. I think that's the term DigitalOcean uses for that, right? There's multiple ways of doing that, and when you go to managed hosting providers for Ghost, right, including Ghost Pro, but there are obviously other options, right? What they do, all of them, is basically that's what they do. They buy like virtual machines or droplets at scale, right? And that's what allows them to offer cheaper prices than if you were trying to do the same setup yourself. And especially in the context of the ActivityPub integration, there's a whole lot of databases that require a lot more resources. And now with version 6, they've also introduced built-in analytics, or first-party analytics. So instead of using Google Analytics or even some of the privacy respecting ones, the analytics are built in. But if you self-host, you need to sign up to an account and link the analytics provider. Anyway, I don't want to get too technical about it, but what you said, that Ghost has out of the box everything that is needed to replace Substack, is an accurate assessment. It is an accurate assessment. WordPress can also do that, but it does require you to add additional plugins, or maybe use a separate service for sending your newsletters, right? Maybe use something like Memberful for for paywalling content and stuff like that, right? So it does do that. Unlike Substack also, and similar to WordPress, but unlike Substack, you can embed also Substack really only supports, for example, embedding YouTube. I think embedding maybe GIF, and recently I think they've also Kirsten made up with Elon Musk, and now you can embed Twitter, right? Ghost doesn't have any of that. So it's an open source software. So anything that, again, I don't want to get too technical, but anything that meets the embed or the open embed standard, you can embed.
That's interesting.
Yeah. WordPress is the same, right? So it's not unique to Ghost, right? So these are some of the solutions. Now, one thing that is good about Substack, right, that makes it good, makes it easier for people to leave, right, is that you have full control over the payment relationship with your subscribers, right? Because it is run through your own Stripe account, right? So there's basically, you can keep all your paid subscriptions that you have on Substack, right? Disconnect the Stripe account, and there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. I described that in my article in great detail, right? Depending on your circumstances. So people need to read that carefully before they make any moves, and take it with you. And the subscriptions remain as is, except now you don't pay 10% to Substack. So without doing anything, without changing your prices, all of a sudden you got 10% pay rise.
Just to be clear, I mean, as soon as you say open source, I assume this is true, but Ghost then wouldn't, just like WordPress, because I've hosted WordPress on a website and used it for blogs in the past. There's nobody to collect payments. You're not giving anyone a share of any revenue that you would have, right? Because it's just an open source protocol software. And so you do have the cost of running something in order to host it. But in exchange, you then have that freedom, and you have nobody taking a cut. So they don't need to be a profitable platform in that sense. Like, I'm sure that the pro version, they're trying to monetize that. But anything that you're suggesting, and I'm sure there's other examples too, but just to make the point for people who don't understand that there is actually a significant difference just in that itself, that if there's a financial interest in growing a platform and having that scaling effect where it becomes dominant, and the things we were talking about earlier, that's completely different than the open source sort of do it yourself, nobody takes a cut, but then also you have nobody can get their fingers in and meddle with it either. So although it will never have the prestige of a massive platform where everybody sort of just mindlessly, logs in and shares all their data and stuff like that. And that is one thing I love about the open source community, is that, like, I've downloaded so many things from the Linux repositories and, GitHub and stuff like that, where it's software that's literally better than professional paid massive Microsoft or Adobe software. It works better. I'm enjoying it more. I use it more, but it's completely free. And so this is just an entirely separate world and a separate way of thinking. I mean, you've really won me over with this whole argument, I have to say, because I was skeptical that Substack was really doing anything wrong in the first place, and that it even could be replaced in a way that was viable for people. But so let's start to wrap this up then, because I want to basically say, or see what you think about the idea of let's not say a timeline per se of when it'll be too late. You keep saying that it's soon, that Substack is going to basically either go public or become so big that it can't be killed. But what do you think would have to happen for them to actually change their policies to essentially create this demand that would make a change within Substack? Or do you think it's not just about sending a message, it actually needs to become financially crippled, and it's already too late to save Substack?
Okay, all right. So again, if we work on the hypothesis that Substack created from the get-go to be a honeypot, why would you want to save that? It's the enemy. No, I don't want them. I don't want them to reform. I don't want them to apologize. I don't want them to backtrack. I want them to die.
It's kind of like there's been all these different points with all these big tech companies,
and I want to make an example of them. I want them as a case study, right? So if Rumble or Odyssey, Rumble is probably a higher risk here, because I mean, if you look at their ownership structure, the biggest shareholder, Rumble is a public company. You can have a look, right? you will start be very concerned, and rightfully so. I invite anyone, just go on finance.yahoo.com, put RUM, which is the ticker code for Rumble, and see who are the biggest like institutional shareholders.
Mm.
I think you may be very concerned when you see that, right? So their shtick, right, other than being the conservative, right, the YouTube for conservatives, their shtick from the get-go was we're free speech, right? We're free speech, right? Okay, right? So they tie you in, right? And then you build an audience there, right? And then okay, well, digital ID, right? So be careful. And now Rumble is already a public company, so they're past that stage, and their model is obviously advertising and paid subscriptions, just like YouTube Premium. So it's a different thing. But Substack must be made an example of, right? To understand. Look, first of all, it also gives us an opportunity, and I think it's important from I guess mental health and mental well-being perspective to really flex our muscle, really flex our muscle and see, okay, look, we have serious power. We actually have real power, right? Because we haven't achieved anything, any attempts that we've made at stopping the enemy, right? And their advances on any front, right? Any front have failed, right? And if people want to give the example of the UK government backtracking on BritCard, I invite you to read the work of Ian Davis and Miles Harris, and you'll see what's actually going on, right? Especially if you're a Brit, especially if you plan on voting for reform, because they said, oh, they'll fight digital ID, right? I'm not going to get into that. So it is very. So I don't want my definition of winning against Substack is that the platform is dead. No more 12 months from now, there's no such thing as Substack, right? This thing, everyone pulls away from their revenue. The Substack loses their 10% cut, right? Mark Andreessen looks as, oh, look, this is not going to work, and the revenue, the revenue graph is going all of a sudden in the wrong direction. Usage graph is going in the wrong direction. I think I'm going to exit now. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Chris and Amish. It was fun, but I think we're going to let you go now, guys. That's what I want. That's the mission. So I can't make it clear.
And then that sends a message to a bunch of other would-be platforms.
Don't you dare to try that.
Yeah.
We have real power. We know how to use it, and we will use it. Don't you dare. That's the message.
I have to say, I think that's actually quite reasonable in this particular case. If you're talking about something like Twitter, I would say it's delusional because it's such a universal platform where there's so many millions of users who have completely different points of view. But like you said, Substack is specifically the dissident community trying to find its legs, and they care about principle, they care about rules, they care about internet freedom, especially. So of all the platforms that you could rally people around abandoning it and taking a stand, I think Substack would be the one place I could think of where people might actually mobilize. And I got to say, I'm going to start looking into the alternatives myself now, because, first of all, I don't live off of Substack revenue. It's nice that I have some, but I can afford to not have that easily. And you're right. I think that would be a good example to set with people actually responding to if they knew what you just explained here. So I'm glad that you came on and explained it, because, they have just enough. They haven't done a good job. There has been actually not that much attention. It's not like Substack put a notice to all users saying, here's the changes we're making and whatever. It's all been kind of quiet, actually. I don't know how it is in Australia, but at least how I use Substack, and I use it every day, I didn't even notice this stuff was going on until I saw you talking about it. And so they're sort of quietly implementing this in certain places. And then I see screenshots of people saying, why am I being age verified when I have a credit card on account? And, these anomalies that just seem sort of random to me. But yeah, I mean, it actually makes quite a bit of sense the way you've presented it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I guess, just another thing on the Substack, like, they're saying they don't mention that. Not only they don't mention that, they're actually gaslighting people, because Chris Best, right? He published an article in the Telegraph, and it's behind a paywall, but he also republished it on his own Substack, right? And so people can go and read it, I guess, for free, unless they need to pass persona, right? Where he basically said, "Oh, we're a free speech platform, and we think that this age verification legislation is bad for free speech, but," and here comes the gaslighting. "Oh, but it's your rules, so we're gonna have to comply with them." Whose rules? They're not my rules. They're not the people's rules. They're the government rules. And that was specifically in the UK context. The Australian thing wasn't even mentioned at all. Like, nobody even mentioned. I doubt if the e-safety commissioner in Australia, Julie Inman-Grant, even was thinking of Substack, right? Probably would have come at some point. And I said it back in October, that there's no doubt that at some point, the Australian government will come for Substack. There's no doubt about it. But then, right, there's the right way to respond, and there's the wrong way to respond. And the right way would have been, well, look, we disagree with that. We're in an American company. We have no presence in Australia. We assert our sovereignty as an American platform. Do your worst. And
Right.
and if they really if they really want to be you really want to be aggressive with us, well, we have this guy, Mark Andreessen. He has the ear of the president of the United States. So maybe he'll call the White House and say that you're giving us hard time, right? And maybe Trump will pass a note to to the Australian ambassador, the Australian prime minister, or whatever, and back off.
Yeah.
Now, the Twitter one, so that's an interesting example. So obviously there was Twitter 1.0, right? The woke Twitter under whatever, and then Musk bought it, right? So people forget that, but there was a point where Twitter was on the brink of collapse. And what saved Twitter, right? Because it was losing money hand over fist, even though he fired 80% of the people. What saved Twitter was that blue check mark verification, which you had to pay for. It is a subscription. So if you want to live stream on Twitter, if you want to participate in the monetization, if you don't want to have the 120 character limit restriction and all that sort of stuff, you have to. So not just so some people just had to pay. Some people actually had to do biometric ID verification, right? And that was with an Israeli company, right? That has ties with Israeli Secret Service, right? And people done that, because look, we can make all this money on Twitter, right? So Twitter was actually on the brink of collapse. But at the time, people thought, oh, no, they're a free speech platform. And Musk presented himself as the free speech absolutist. And he's anti-woke. And he's anti-trans. And he's that. And he's that. And he's
He
a conservative.
unbanned Alex
We gotta
Jones or
save him.
something. Everyone thought that.
Oh, yeah, he unbanned Alex Jones. He unbanned Donald Trump. Everyone's back. Look, all these people that have been banned. All our heroes are back, right? Robert Malone and all these ones, right? We gotta support this guy. Look at him. He's doing the right thing. And then he brought in Linda Yaccarino as CEO. And people still didn't get it. So sometimes I look at people and say, look, we're supposed to be people who understand what's going on, right? We've learned a thing or two, I thought, since 2020. And sometimes I would just, guys, sorry, no disrespect, but what the fuck?
Yeah. You're right. And I guess that does prove a point that even something like that, which sort of seems like just like Twitter could never go away, it was at that point, and it was really the success of the gaslighting. And if you think of it as a psyop, that's basically what it is. It's because you had coordination from so many different people, essentially the Trump camp and all the Trump people hyping it up that Elon Musk is the future, he's going to save everything. That was really, if you think of it that way, it's almost a sign of desperation to save this platform. And I mean, Elon Musk himself is just, we don't have to get into it, but everything he does is like that. Everything he does is a fraud that is on the brink of collapse and is being propped up by mysterious forces. And so that is a good point that, Substack would be in a much more precarious position than that yet. And I don't know how much cost they have of hosting all the video and whatever it costs them to run it. But it might not take that much for them to wobble and start to fall.
I would even encourage, you don't have to leave Substack. Just stop monetizing directly. Like instead of collecting your thing, like, send people to buy me a coffee, send people to your PayPal, send people to your Cash App, whatever you want to do, way more. I don't know, whatever you want. Just not do Substack so that they don't get their 10%. And keep hammering the platform. You want to keep publishing, keeping in mind that some people in certain jurisdictions won't be able to access your content, right? But if you want to, keep hammering their, Amazon Web Services bills and Mailgun, which is the service they use to send all the emails, knock yourself out. I have no problem with it. Just don't you don't contribute to that, to Substack bottom line by doing that. If anything, you're hurting them. Just don't monetize. Do not monetize. That is the key. Do not monetize directly to Substack. You can monetize through any other means you want, by all means. And you will make more money without changing your prices. Right? So that's what I think eventually Substack will respond, and maybe they say, oh, those who don't monetize at all, or those who don't have a connected Stripe account can't use our platform. That's fine.
Yeah, I could see that.
Right? They will respond. As I said as I said at the beginning of the interview. So Chris Best and Hamish McKenzie, they're just Klaus Schwab for the WEF. They're just cutouts, right? Don't worry about them. They're not the brain. The brain and the money is the guy that I showed you at the beginning. He's the brain, and he's done it many times before. He knows what he's doing, right? To quote Epstein, these are the really smart guys. That's it.
Yeah. No, I have to thank you again, because I saw all these different pieces, but I didn't see how they were connected in this particular way. So I'm going to write an article myself, just, and it'll help me process it, because I have to decide what to do now. I probably will demonetize my Substack, but I want to thank you for coming and explaining that. And I can now get behind this idea where it sort of was unthinkable to me for a little bit, that it's like, we finally had a nice place where we could all talk and we could even monetize it. And so you have all these good people on both sides. And I didn't mind that Substack was in the middle of it, taking a little cut. That seems totally fair.
Absolutely. They were providing a great platform, right? And they had commitment to free speech, supposedly.
Yeah. But now it is at that point where they need to be taught a lesson. And
the mask has come off. They've shown their hand.
They
have well and truly, Substack has shown their hand. They've shown, this is what's happening. And obviously that has happened in the UK and Australia, anywhere else, and pretty much every jurisdiction now, right, including a lot of US states, right, introducing similar legislation. So obviously Substack will comply, even if they're not designated, even if they're, Minnesota introduced this. Well, sorry, if you're in Minnesota, you can't. Or Italy or Greece or France or whatever, right? So it's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. And Substack will comply. And we know exactly how compliance looks. They're just going to put random age verification on random publications through this persona thing, which is highly invasive and very, very shady company. And good luck with that. So people need to understand this is what's happening. This is what has happened in the UK and Australia. There was the better rollout. It will get worse from here. It will not get better. If we don't respond the way that I'm saying, it will get worse. It will get significantly worse. And then other platforms will see, oh, well, that has worked. Maybe, I don't know, Medium will do that. I don't know who else will do that. Maybe Rumble will do it. Oh, they were able to get away with that. Because Rumble, again, the Canadian CEO that they have, again, he's just a guy, right? There's money behind it, and people can go and have a look who's the money.
Yeah, and I think that way that you put it, of getting away with it, is the way to think of it. It's not just how much does it directly affect me, my particular little thing that I have for myself. It is, can they get away with the thing? And then what message does that send, versus if they don't get away with it, that sends the opposite message. So if people are interested in, which clearly Substack is, we're interested in exposing, corruption in general. That's what Substack was built on, is real journalism and real rallying cries against COVID and against different forms of tyranny. So we don't like people getting away with it. It's just ironic that now we have to, do that with the very platform that we've been building an audience around and using. But it's at the same time, like you said, you just demonetize and you keep publishing, or not demonetize, but switch people to a different system of monetizing.
And if you don't use any of the paywalling features that are provided by Substack, right? Paywalling the content, paywalling the comments, paywalling the chat room. If you don't do any of that and you operate just like purely on a donation thing, like a lot of Substack authors do, it couldn't be easier, right? Just literally couldn't be easier. You just disconnect Stripe in the correct way, right? Substack needs to disconnect from their end instead of you disconnecting. Your subscriptions all remain the same, right? And you send people to a Stripe page, or PayPal page. No difference. Or buy me a coffee or whatever you want to use. Doesn't matter. Right? So nothing changes. Now, if you do use some of the paywalling features, there's obviously it's a little bit more complicated, because as soon as you disconnect Stripe from Substack, you will lose all those paywalling features. Right? So people need to plan accordingly how they're going to do that. Right? There's different solutions. I don't want to get into that, but that's like actual actions that you can do now, right? You can do, and if you want to keep publishing, right? Keeping in mind that more and more of your audience, right, who are if you're a dissident writer, more and more of your audience are obviously aware of the risk of digital ID and will be subjected to age verification, and will almost certainly, hopefully, refuse, right? Just keep that in mind, right? So you need to start planning your exit strategy. Right. I mean, I started planning my exit strategy 6 months before the Australian legislation came in. But my assumption at the time was that Substack was doing the right thing, and they will be forced, right? They will be forced, either forced to comply or be banned or stuff like that, especially when they published on their official Substack a post along the lines of, yes, we're a social media platform, right? As the social media legislation is about to be activated in Australia, you're literally asking for it. So I said, okay. I did not expect this. I did not expect the rug pull. So that caught me by surprise, right? And that kind of made me think, okay, based on patterns from other platforms and what we've seen in other aspects, right? That was a honeypot. Because get all those people, dissident writers, on one platform instead of each of them running their own blog or their own website, right? Boom. That's it.
All right. Michael, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to be writing up about this and following up on it, because, you really changed my mind on this. So I appreciate it. I wish you a lot of luck, and tell people, where are you now? Because I had a hard time finding you for a little bit there. Where do you want people to be finding your stuff?
So obviously I'm not on Substack anymore. The Substack publication is actually set to private now, so you can subscribe. I kept it in private because I still have some content that I need to tweak before I delete that. So the best place to find me is on my website, which is actionabletruth.media. Okay, that's the ghost-powered. That's the ghost-powered website that you go to. That's my website. At the top, there'll be you'll be able to sign up as a member, and there's a free membership and two paid memberships as well, right? Two paid tiers, yes. And and then I have your email. You'll be able to access all the member-only content, right? If you're a free member, you won't be able to access the paid content. I do have some paid content, right? But other than that, it's a very, very streamlined experience. Another place, and then that's kind of I'm trialing, and it goes fairly well at the moment. I'm running a private community, so that can be found at community.actionabletruth.media. Again, there's free membership and two paid tiers. And then you can sign up there as well. So that's kind of like a social media platform that I control. Obviously, no age verification. There's no algorithms. There's no bots. There's no nonsense, right? I control everything, right? So I'm it's like God mode, right? So that's basically would be the two best places to find me.
Okay. Well, thank you. I hope that your success inspires others, and I hope that you continue to grow. And I'm glad that you're willing to take interviews like this and explain to guys like me, because I was skeptical, but you won me over.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me on, and I guess giving me a chance to also explain that. I mean, I've done that in a video format, and obviously I've written a very lengthy article. And I know that people don't necessarily like reading stuff, so that gives me another opportunity and kind of put the message out there, right? That there is urgent action that needs to be taken now. And hopefully
Right.
I've explained why that action is needed. And yeah, I mean, from there, I just hope that it like really catches on. And if just the dissident circle and our as content creators and our audience takes this action, and our audience demands from content creators who don't like do that to do that, we can actually destroy the platform. Like we actually have significant influence on Substack right now, but that window of opportunity will not remain open forever.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll end it there, and maybe we get to talk again sometime. But I'll definitely be checking up on what you are saying, because I can tell that you're seeing these warning signs ahead of many people who are, their plan will work if we don't actually do something about it. So it's valuable.
100%.